Hey friends, Grandmaster Brown here. Kyudo is a traditional Japanese martial art using archery. It's fascinating how they use this enormous 7 foot long asymmetrical bow and how talented they are at shooting even from horseback. Kyudo, like most martial arts, trains students not just in technique, but in awareness and spirit. Here's a little story that goes along with that. Once there was a young man named Saito, and he wanted more than anything to become an expert archer in the service of his feudal lord, or daimyo. He practiced constantly since he was 3 years old and was approaching the age where he would be old enough to join his father in service to his lord. One afternoon, Saito was in a meadow outside of town, shooting with two of his friends. The meadow was a good place to shoot because it lay at the base of a cliff, and if they overshot, they would usually be able to recover their arrows. The boys took turns naming targets and trying to hit them. Saito was happy. He loved shooting, and nothing made him happier than the sound of the arrows hitting the targets. As they practiced, a passing stranger spotted the boys, waved, and stopped to watch them. Saito loved an audience. He winked at his friends and quickly, 1, 2, 3, put 3 arrows into a tree that he was shooting at. That's very accurate shooting, the stranger called out as he walked across the grass towards the boys. Yes, said Saito. The stranger raised an eyebrow at Saito's reply. Are you always that accurate? He asked. Almost always, Saito replied. I am studying to be an archer in the service of my daimyo. Our accuracy is crucial in battle. I see, said the stranger. Have you ever been in battle? No, Saito admitted, but I can shoot from atop a horse, I can shoot birds in mid-flight, and I always hit what I'm aiming at. I'll do fine in battle. Said the stranger, neither agreeing or disagreeing. Let's see you hit that tree. He pointed at a tree about 50 yards away. Saito pulled an arrow from his quiver and hit the tree easily. The stranger walked over to the tree, pulled out the arrow, and then reached into his bag and took out a small piece of cloth and wedged it into the space in the bark. Returning to Saito, he handed him the arrow. Follow me, the stranger said, walking still further from the tree. When they were about 150 feet away, the stranger said, shoot from here and see if you can hit the cloth. Saito set an arrow in the string, pulled it back, and without even a pause to aim, released it. The arrow flew straight and true and pinned the cloth to the tree. That was easy, Saito said. Let me do a harder one. He scanned the meadow until he saw a rock sticking up a few feet above the grass. Trotting off, he climbed the slippery surface. Standing atop it, fitted another arrow and fired, and again he hit the cloth squarely in the middle. Would you like me to shoot a bird? Saito said. A target is a lot more fun if it's moving. No, said the stranger, but there is something I bet you can't shoot. What? Said Saito. If it can be hit with an arrow, I can hit it. I bet you can't hit the trunk of that tree right over there. The stranger pointed to a very large tree with a wide trunk sitting at the base of the cliff. I'll bet you can't hit it from 100 feet. I'll take that bet, Saito said. What are we betting? I get to choose where you stand, the stranger said. Yes, yes, said Saito. No problem. What are we betting? If you hit the trunk of the tree below the lowest branch with your first arrow, I'll buy you a new bow. If you do not hit the trunk with your first arrow, you will come to my house every afternoon for a year, and I will put you to work. Saito grinned and then bowed. You have a bet, he said. Very well, said the stranger. Follow me. The three boys were huffing and puffing by the time they reached the top of the cliff. They looked down over the meadow that they had just been in, also down over the town and the surrounding area. Saito saw the big tree about 75 feet below them. The trunk was clearly visible. The stranger had underestimated him. He had shot from heights like this before. It would be no problem hitting the trunk from this distance. The new bow is as good as mine, he whispered to his friends. They smiled back and nodded. Very good, said the stranger. This will do nicely. All right, Saito said as he pulled an arrow from his quiver and set it on the string. He was about to pull it back when the stranger put a hand on his shoulder. Wait, he said. Remember, I get to choose where you stand. Saito returned his arrow to the quiver. The stranger walked along the edge of the cliff, obviously looking for something. Finally, a small, flat boulder caught his attention. He nudged it with his foot. It rocked slightly. He stepped onto it. It shifted and slipped. Saito caught his breath, fearing it would topple over the edge with the stranger upon it. It held, but barely. The stranger stepped down. This is the place I choose, he said, pointing to the boulder. Shoot from here, atop this rock. Sato's smile faded. He walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down. His toe caught some loose gravel. It clattered over the edge and bounced down the cliff. The tree looked suddenly much smaller. But if I fell, Saito said, I might be killed. Oh, yes, the stranger said. I would say you would most certainly be killed. Saito stared at the rock. He tested it with his hands. The edge dipped a little bit. He shot a quick glance to his friends. They stood motionless, their eyes wide. A look of resolution came over Saito's face. I'll do it, he said. Slowly, deliberately, he approached the rock. Drawing the arrow from his quiver again, he stepped his first foot onto the rock. The wind caught the tip of his bow and tugged it gently. The boulder shifted slightly under his weight. Saito froze. There's the whip of the string to think about, he said, his foot still gingerly resting atop the boulder. Let me think for a moment. Yes, said the stranger, there is the whip to consider, but it would be no different from the shot you took from the top of the rock down there. Saito's eyes again went to the meadow. It seemed to swim before his eyes. Carefully, he edged his second foot into place. Slowly, he drew his bow, and the wind gusted. Saito scrambled back to safety. It was a silly bet in the first place, he muttered, putting the arrow back in his quiver. Yes, it was, wasn't it? The stranger replied. But that doesn't really matter given that we both gave our word. Saito looked into his eyes. He was serious. Yes, Saito said, I gave my word. I will come to your home each afternoon for a year to work for you. It beats falling to my death off a cliff. The stranger smiled. I suppose it does. Now, before you go down, may I ask a favor? He said. May I borrow your bow and an arrow? Saito smiled and handed him his bow and the arrow he had just put back into his quiver. The stranger bowed deeply as he received it. He turned, walked to the edge of the cliff, and climbed atop the rock. Carefully, he drew the bow and then paused and waited. Without movement or sound, he released the string. It whipped against the upper part of the bow with a crisp, clear sound, and the arrow flew. Saito and his friend stepped to the edge of the cliff and cautiously peered down. There was the arrow protruding out of the exact center of the trunk of the tree. All of this time you have been shooting to improve your aim, said the stranger, backing away from the cliff. Come to my house tomorrow when the sun is low in the horizon. I will introduce you to my other Kyudo students. Then you will begin shooting to improve yourself instead of just your aim. The biggest battles we all face in life are not external, but within us. To do the right thing, to say the right thing, and to be the right person. To accept ourselves as flawed and learn to overcome those flaws with time and with effort. Martial arts is an individual practice, not a team effort. It is impossible to do well in this activity and coast along letting the team carry you. Be challenged and push yourself to do more. Do better and look within for the power and strength to accomplish greatness.